The order, this is a special meeting, City of McCracken. Let's do a roll call.
Chris Betts, Commissioner.
Austin Jackson, Commissioner.
Brian Walker, Mayor.
Nicole Fehrenbach, City Clerk.
Shane Turnbull, Water Operator.
All right. Purpose of this meeting is to discuss the Dave LIBBERTON property cleanup. We wanted to get Toby Kuhn in the same room with us, just so we can kind of get everything out on the table and make sure we all understand who's responsible for what.
Okay.
I know that you probably have some questions of us. We probably have some questions of you. Certainly, this is something that's been going on for a while, so we just need to get some answers, I guess, before we sign the dotted line.
Okay. Would you like me to give like a brief history?
Yeah,
of
let's
involvements
start.
and
Let's
everything?
start with that. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
First of all, on behalf of the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, Bureau of Waste Management, it is a pleasure to be here today. This was a site that was referred to the legal dump program. The legal dump program is mandated or was created by state statute, and basically I'm the only program manager for it, so that means I get all 105 counties in Kansas. So they pay me to drive lots of miles and listen to podcasts, and then occasionally talk to people. So, but I do cleanups all across the state. I do anything from small ones to the largest one I've done is 943 tons. And so, but this program, when it was created by state statute, it's at the consent of the city or county. This is one of the few programs where KDHE is not going to come, it will never come into your community and says you have to do this and stuff. So to request our assistance, we have what's called a legal dump request form. That was received by KDHE on April 2nd. And that was, it was initially signed by the mayor at that time, Joseph Tippman, if I said his last name correct. And then and then we received it April 2nd at KDHE. Due to it being at the end of our fiscal year, I didn't have time to get started on that because our fiscal year starts over on July 1st. I didn't get started on it till June. June 4th is when I mailed out the first notification letter to the property owner. And then the first site visit, first time I came out here to actually look at the property was on June 20th of last year. Since that time, we've looked at several different things with the property as far as I can only deal with items that are considered a solid waste in the state of Kansas. And I can't tear down buildings, I can't go inside of buildings, anything like that. So we had some discussions and we were able to get a signed consent agreement from Mr. LIBBERTON, and then we also did some other paperwork through KDHE. And right now we're to the point where KDHE is ready to move forward with the city as far as actually doing the work to reimburse the city, because we can spend up to $10,000 per site. As far as the cleanup goes, but that is a 75-25% match. The 25% match by the local governing body is usually because of in-kind services utilizing equipment and manpower. We pay FEMA rates for manpower and then also FEMA rates for the equipment. So if you have an employee making $20 an hour, the rate that gets charged to KDHE for the reimbursement is $30 per hour. And then we also use whatever, the FEMA equipment rates for whatever equipment that we decide to use. For instance, like if the city needs to rent like a skid steer, with a grapple bucket, those type of things. What we look at is, of course, what we look at is what's more cost effective, for reimbursement. Is the FEMA rate higher than what the rental charge is, or is the rental charge higher than what the FEMA rate would be? Whichever rate is higher is the one that we use, when we figure up, the reimbursement costs and everything. Usually, It doesn't cost the city out of pocket to do the work. It does cost the city time because they do have their manpower and their equipment doing the remediation activities versus doing whatever else they would be doing that day. By allowing the higher rates, that helps the city meet their 25% match. And that includes, like the roll-offs. So a lot of times when we do our cost estimated spreadsheet, I think I sent you just one that was just,
Yes, sir.
is an Excel spreadsheet. It looks on paper that it's going to cost the city out of pocket, but when you look at what the manpower and equipment is, versus the other costs, maybe the roll-offs, the disposal fees, those type of things, it's usually a wash, for the city. Now, if the city decides to use a contractor, that's a different situation because that 25% is really hard. It's something that's hard to meet with staff time for that. I had sent, a couple weeks ago, I sent, the paperwork that needs to be completed, between the city and Kdhe because, we have to establish a contract, the city has to pass a resolution, because there will be a reimbursement from Kdhe. And then we just did like an estimated cost spreadsheet. There's a sexual harassment form that needs to be signed. I'm trying to think of what else is in that packet. But those are, the majority of the different things. So the contract at this point is the draft contract. We can't have the city sign it and send it back. Our contract's, the exact same one that I sent the city. We'll go through our concurrence process. It goes through our fiscal, it goes through our legal, and then it gets sent back out to the city, for signature. So it's basically, it goes through, I think, 11 different people before the secretary signs the contract. But the city will sign the contract, then the secretary of Kansas Department of Health and Environment will sign the contract. Once I get that packet back, then, we can schedule when we're going to do the work and everything. So I do know that the LIBBERTON family has been, doing a lot of metal recovery off the property, which drastically reduces costs. I highly encourage that to continue, for them to be able to recycle it. And I know we talked about you're going to send me the receipts because everything that's coming and going from that property, as we discussed numerous times, I need to see a receipt of where it's going. And I already have some that have been sent, but the most recent ones, I'll need copies of those as well. We do that to make sure that everything is properly disposed, because we don't take anything from the property, to any place except a, permitted landfill or permitted recycler, those type of things. So if there is metal that's still left on the property and it's something that can be easily separated out when we're doing the cleanup, then that will go to a recycler, and then that money, comes back to the city, to help recoup some of the costs. We don't give the money right back.
Do I need to have receipts of that to have a paper trail as well, or is it okay for?
When the city, actually is doing the work, like if we use like a roll-off company that comes in, the city will actually pay those invoices,
Right.
and then you'll provide all those receipts to me when we do our final reimbursement packet.
So I don't need to keep a copy of the receipts before?
No.
Okay.
No, those are just, the only thing that you'll need to keep a copy of is the city expenditures,
Okay.
because I'll need a copy of all those. And then once I get everything back from the city as far as exactly, what the manpower was used, exactly what the equipment is, because I just have to justify with the one I sent out right now, I have to justify why we're doing a contract, type thing. So they always change. Sometimes it takes shorter, sometimes it takes longer, sometimes we think we're going to have 4 people, we only have 2, or, it's just an estimated cost at this point. We're not locked into anything with that spreadsheet
Okay.
and stuff at this point.
So we need to keep track of hours.
You
and
need to keep
people.
track of hours, and I'll be keeping track of hours, because the one thing that is in the contract, it does state that Kdhe will provide technical guidance. So whenever any work is being performed, I will be here. If it's 1 day, if it's 2 days, if it's 3 days, I will be here every second that anything is being taken from that property and stuff. I don't tell the city workers how to run their equipment, those type of things. That's all on them. I'll joke with them about letting me run the Bobcat or whatever, but they never let me. But I'll handle like any type of disagreements between like the property owner and, as far as what goes and what stays, because it's my solid waste determination and stuff that ultimately has the final say. So if there is something that I don't consider solid waste, but the city does, then it's gonna stay, that type of thing, so. Because I have a lot of guidelines I have to meet within KDHE to be able to justify those type of decisions and stuff, so. But my preference is when we do the cleanup, with my schedule, having to do these all over the state, it works a lot better for me if we can schedule consecutive days, if at all possible. Like if we would do like a Tuesday, Wednesday, or a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, versus doing a Monday here, a Thursday here, a Friday, next week or something. It makes it very difficult, for my schedule, if we can just do it and get it done. And I don't care how long the city works, per day, I don't have to quit just after 8 hours. I mean, I've had other places that have worked from sun up to sundown just so they could get it done quicker. I'm fine with that. It doesn't matter to me.
Okay. Anything else you can think of before we start badgering you with questions?
Not really. I mean, this is, it's the only program that we have through KDHE that helps, pay, for, these type of cleanups. Normally, without the illegal dump program, if a city wants to do an abatement on a property because of a nuisance, violation, I don't enforce any city codes or city ordinances, so it doesn't matter to me how tall the fence is or how tall the grass is. I mean, that's nothing to do with this. I just regulate the solid waste and any hazardous waste or the household hazardous waste, those type of things. That's just only thing that I look at when we're doing those cleanups. So, as we're doing the cleanup, it's not going to be a home and garden TV project, necessarily by the time we're done, but it is going to be, all the items of solid waste will be removed because there will be a return to compliance letter that will be issued, from myself, saying that we're done. Now, that doesn't mean that you might have some ordinances, or something might be in violation. And that's something, that once KDHE is done, then the city can resume, whatever enforcement actions that the city does for your city codes and stuff. So, and I think we talked about that in the beginning. I only do solid waste. I don't do anything with the city. So once, that is all done, but this program, it saves the cities and counties from having to go through district court or municipal court and filing all types of different fees, and then ultimately doing the work, themselves without any reimbursement whatsoever. Because up until this point, KDHE has done all the paperwork. I mean, I've processed, all the different notification letters, all the different things that I've had to do and everything. So that really takes some burden off of city staff from not having to pursue that.
Questions?
Monday through Friday, you're available?
If we want to do it on a weekend, I can make arrangements to do that as well.
Okay.
Even though I am a state employee, when I'm actually doing a cleanup, that is something that, I can go over my 40 hours, I can adjust my hours, I can do different things, during those cleanups and stuff like that as well.
How far a drive is it for you to come to McCracken? Where are you based out of?
Topeka.
Okay.
So
it's a drive.
So the drive to me, it doesn't matter, and stuff like that. Because if we're going to start at 8 o'clock in the morning, I'll be here the night before, type thing. So my preference would be Monday through Friday, but if we needed to do a weekend because of staffing issues or anything like that, we could do a weekend as well.
So the way that I think we initially started this process was that the city didn't have any out-of-pocket money to put towards this project.
Correct.
It was, we would provide labor, and we've got a few pieces of equipment that we thought would be applicable to this type of deal. So when I read through when I read through this contract, we're still responsible for things like the rollout. We're still responsible for things up front in the hopes that we get reimbursed by the state of Kansas. Is that an accurate assessment?
The funding for this comes through what's called the Solid Waste Management Fund. The Solid Waste Management Fund is the $1 per ton tipping fee that everybody pays when you go to the landfill and stuff. We've never had a history in this program going back to the 90s where there wasn't money available in the Solid Waste Management Fund. There has been some wording that has changed in our contracts, like for any federal funding, because there has been a lot of federal funding that's been cut to the state of Kansas, and there's also been some cuts in the state general fund. There's never been a time where we've ever had our solid waste management fund, but that wording was changed here recently through the governor's office, just on the case that there would be federal or state general fund, money cut, but this funding comes from the solid waste management fee fund and stuff. I think it's a very unlikely event that the KDHE would not follow through with their reimbursement for the cost of this. Because if you look at that paragraph 11, I think in the contract, but if you look at, I think like it's either the second paragraph or the third paragraph that talks about the funding is through solid waste management fund.
Well, and that was exactly the paragraph that I marked because
That's the number one question I've received over the last month since that has been added.
Since Doge took over and
I can't make any politically comments on that on the record or anything to that effect, but I can say that it is through the Solid Waste Management Fund, which is not a state general fund and it's not federally funded. So we don't receive, KDHE does receive EPA money, but it's not for this program.
So up to this point, there's never been a lack of funds for
And
this
I have
type
not been
of-
told that my funding's in jeopardy because I spend thousands upon thousands of dollars across the state. I have pending contracts all over the state of Kansas right now. And I would hate to imagine a situation where all of a sudden KDHE is not going to pay all these cities and counties back because I'm sure there might be some ramifications.
Yes, sir.
There would be a lot of unhappy people.
Yes, sir.
I can't guarantee anything because that's above my pay grade, but I can just say from doing this program for 6 years, I can't imagine a scenario where we're going to leave anybody.
I know that, so the reimbursement timeline, I know it's predicated on when we finish this project.
Mm-hmm.
How long after we complete the project, turn in the paperwork that you require, how long does that usually take before reimbursement?
1 to 2 weeks. So usually the biggest holdup is getting all the paperwork back from the city because you're waiting on invoices from maybe the roll-off company, those type of things. So once I get all of those, I can have that paperwork turned around in a couple hours where it's submitted through fiscal. And then usually, with electronic deposit, it's usually within 1 to 2 weeks.
So we just give you you just do a ACH type of a transaction into.
With part of the contract is I get your federal tax ID number, and then through the state accounting, whatever they do and stuff, everything is tied to that, and then the state just puts them
Dumps it.
dumps the money right into your account. They used to mail out checks, but everything is went to ACH now.
And we'll continue to try and make this as, minimize this as much as possible for everybody else. Getting more stuff out, getting, before anybody has an outlay.
If the city, wishes, there is a provision in the contract where we can, front some money up front. If it's a situation with, bank accounts and, trying to get stuff paid while you're waiting for reimbursement, we can, put forth up to 25% of the contract in advance, to do an advance payment.
I noticed that in one of the paragraphs, is if we needed that option, what kind of lead time do you need on that?
That's just something that, as soon as the contract is passed, then I just immediately turn around and just do a voucher, our voucher system, for 25%, of the contract. And then, get that, sent right, I'll get sent right up to fiscal, then it'll be within a week or two.
Okay. Well, that's all the questions I had. Anybody else?
Is Rush County landfill, is that where we can haul this stuff to? Or do we have to go to Ness County? Or
As long as
it's a long ways away?
As long as it's a permitted facility and stuff, and they accept municipal waste, which if they're operating, if it's Rush County landfill, I'm sure it is. I'm not aware of all the landfills, around in this area. I haven't looked into it that far. But the thing is like if we use Rush County, if we use one of the local landfills in this area, sometimes the county commissions will waive, some of the disposal costs, for it. I'm not saying that they would in this case. I haven't talked to them, but I have had other cities talk to, their local landfill and say, we're doing this cleanup project with Kdhe. Can you waive the fees or do a reduced, per ton fee? Either which way, whether they waive the fee or not, we will still show on the reimbursement that's what the cost was. So if they charge $35 a ton, but yet they're waiving it, for our purposes through Kdhe, we'll still show that it was $35 a ton because that comes into your 25% match. Then if the county is willing to work with you in any way, we can include the county employees at the landfill as part of your in-kind match as well for their labor and equipment, used to process the waste.
Well, Rush County was closed for a little while.
Yeah, we just need to find that
Yeah, I
out.
think they're open again.
Are they open again? Was it closed for the winter because of staffing or something?
I'm not sure that they were.
They are open, they have a
I know
new
that
guy
they were open,
right now.
yeah.
Okay, they were closed a little while
They were for a little bit.
during the winter because
And they do
Mitch
take-
ended
and they do
up
take
going to
hazardous
Hayes.
waste.
And I know the director there really well, at the landfill now, the one that oversees everything, the supervisor. I used to work for him.
Well, Ness City's almost the same mileage. It's
Right.
almost as close to go to Ness County
I don't
as
know
it is
them.
to, it's a long ways down there. Trucking is gonna be,
Well, the nice thing about it is we like to keep our business local, so we go right back into your county.
Okay, I got his phone number, so I can just call
yes,
him.
yes,
Yeah.
but,
Okay.
If you can use
Yeah,
the
he used to
Rush
work
County.
for KPHE, actually.
yeah.
Or KDOT.
So mileage-wise, Chris, they're about the same.
I think they're about the same. It's 40 or 45 miles to Rush Center, and I think it's a little less than this.
Okay.
But
Should be
you have to
cool.
hire somebody like
Oh.
Skillet with a side dump where you can pack it on there and
20.
go that.
Yeah.
It's not too much fun to go in a wheat truck,
No.
22, right? Yeah.
It's too damn fun. I think Ness County was closer.
Because it's always great if we can put the in-kind services, if we can get some additional help from the city or from the county, just.
Because this is our staff, you're looking at it.
Yeah, so like if the county's willing to, do anything, even accept it, and stuff, it's not unusual to include their time as well, because they're processing the waste, as long as they say, yeah, we'll work with the city to take all that, that's all we need to get that, to use their, manpower and equipment, as far as the 25% match goes.
Do we have to get that in writing from them?
All you have to do is just tell me that they're agreeing to work with you.
Okay.
And stuff. So I don't go back and I don't come in and look at your books as far as what your rates of pay are. We don't do that type of investigation, and stuff. Just
Shane makes $100 an hour. He's taking a pay cut doing this.
I've seen some very high rates that I've questioned before, and that is one that would get my attention.
He did say he encourages us to, if we have temporary summer help, even doing mowing and that, to include those people, or to even send a letter out to say, hey, we're gonna hire so many people this day to do this just for one day, hire them on the books for one day. As long as they're covered by our insurance, we're good. If we need extra people.
Yeah, I mean, if you have part-time help, that, summer help, and you bring them in, to help with this, I mean, they get included as your 25%, and that's still at, if you pay them $10 an hour normally, we're being charged 15 because of the rate. So, I mean, it's the same thing if you have council members that are, helping and
Chris
stuff.
makes 200 an hour.
Well, whatever.
And spend 300 an hour. I'm upside down already.
I've worked with smaller communities where they've had a member of council or even a member of the community that had maybe like a skid steer or a loader with a gravel bucket. And so what they did was they used that piece of equipment. They've sent an invoice, to the city, and as far as what the cost of that was, and then that's the invoice. We look at, for FEMA, which rate is higher and stuff. I've been asked sometimes, what is the FEMA rate for a piece of equipment? This many horsepower, and I've given to them, and ironically, that's the invoice that was charged. And I'm sure there's been times where that ended up being a donation on the backside. But I don't know that, and I mean, that's not for me to investigate.
Do we have a skid loader?
We do.
Okay,
Yeah.
so.
But if there is, those type of pieces of equipment, there is ways to,
Do they can grapple?
to be able to do
Don't
that.
have a gravel?
We don't have the grapple attached.
Yeah,
do
there's
we?
a grapple bus.
Oh, we do?
Yeah, we need, grapple is highly recommended because
Yeah,
the
you can't
less we have
Armstrong
to, because we don't like to do a lot of hand work and stuff, just for the simple fact of you don't want to have someone get their hand in something that they shouldn't or anything. So grapple buckets are, something that we definitely try to use.
Okay.
It's not going to be 100% when we're done. I mean, I try to get 99%, which leaves about 1% of the total waste. So there might be some smaller items that, we just, that we do miss. But because it comes down to cost effectiveness. If we have to spend, 4 or 5 hours walking around trying to pick up every tiny little piece, it just becomes, too astronomical for the cost on some of my sites. Now, this being a little bit smaller, we'll do the best we can to get, majority of it.
Okay.
You did say he is allowed to have some things in his
Yes.
yard.
Yes, just like anybody else, they are allowed to have items, that are remaining. What I'll do is I'll work with the property owner before we do any of the work whatsoever. If there's items that are outside that, are deemed not to be a solid waste, I will mark those with orange tape. I'll take a picture of it. I'll walk the entire property, with the property owner and stuff. And then before we start any work, I'll make sure I point out to the people driving the equipment and doing the work that anything that has this orange tape all over it, that stays, type thing. And so, but I document, what it looked like before, what it looked like after. I've never had an issue, at a site as far as, those type of things. I've had people come back after the fact and say, well, you took such and such item. I go through the pictures and say, we walked it, it's not in the pictures. It was never marked, you didn't tell me about it. Because if you tell me about it, we're gonna mark it immediately and take a picture, and then we're gonna move on to the next item. So, and then there's been things that I've discovered that the person wanted because it had value, that we left, but they forgot all about it. But if it's something within a pile of everything else, we're not going to pick things out of the pile to, try to get something, value. If it's caught up in it, then it's caught up in it.
So, I know you're familiar with this piece of property. If you were guessing, how much time would it take to clean it up?
I guesstimate everything as a day and a half, just because I always like to, go higher and stuff. So much of it depends on how many people we have doing it and what type of equipment are we using, and stuff. If we're using maybe just one skid steer and maybe one person, it would probably take about 12 hours, I would assume. But if we have a couple different people, I think, with as much as they've already removed and what else they're still going to remove, I think we could knock it out in a day. It could be maybe a longer day, but I think we could get it done.
Okay.
Now, of course, that depends if equipment breaks down, if you have a flat tire, or, hydraulic hose breaks, or, those types of things.
Sure. Okay. Shane, any thoughts, concerns?
No,
You think between the skid loader and the front end loader on that tractor, we could get her wiped out with that?
yeah,
And if we use roll-offs, and, if we can get 2 roll-offs to start with, it is what I normally recommend, that we use roll-offs. And if we have a roll-off company come in and, drop one, and then go back and get one more, and then, because a lot of times the first one fills up really fast, because those we can get all the big piles, all the, everything like that. We're not having to do a lot of other work, and then they can bring, because a lot of times by the time the first one's filled, they're just dropping off the second one. But I don't think we'd need more than 2 roll-offs and stuff, so.
Like Staub, like.
Yeah, it's like Staub did them the last time, and then he even took the metal to Acme for us too.
Yeah, if there's still a lot of metal remaining, we might want to do 1 roll-off just for metal, and then 1, for the solid waste as well. Because once again, if there's a little piece of metal inside, like a pile of, otherwise, solid waste, we're not going to move everything just to pick out 1 piece of metal or something. Because as long as it's going to, to municipal waste, landfill, where they accept municipal waste versus a construction and demolition landfill, which is different. If it's going to municipal landfill, they'll take everything, is there still tires? Do we have any tires on the property? A few. Yeah, the tires we'd do separate. It'd be a separate load.
I have one question. How about firewood?
Firewood is not considered a solid waste. If the city would like to have that cleaned up and the city wants to take it to their burn pile, I have no issues with that, but that's, up to the city, and that's something that we would decide at that point. Like if you wanted the firewood left outside there, because I think there's a pile right by the door.
Yeah, that's about five cords of
Yeah,
firewood.
I mean, if that's something that you wanted, that's not a solid waste. That's not something that I can make
Okay.
you get rid of. But if you want to get rid of it because you're not going to be burning that much wood anytime soon, and the city would like to haul it away to make it look better, it wouldn't be a problem for me.
It's staffed pretty well, but yeah.
Yeah.
So we estimated the roll-off cost at $4,000. That would carry 2 of them.
I think that's, pretty high. Let me pull that up here real quick. I was just looking at that.
It was like 2,000 last time we had it,
For the city cleanup, that cost $3,100.
for just the roll-offs.
That was for everything.
Yeah, but I'm just talking,
And who was,
Yeah, we had
what
3 or
property
4
was
of
that?
them.
Yeah, we changed them out. They were $250 per roll-off. I remember that. But it was $275 because they had to haul it to Great Bend, so we charged an extra $25 because
think it's
that was when Rush County's landfill was
$300
closed.
300 now?
Yeah, it's pretty inexpensive though.
Yeah.
Is there a local roll-off company?
Not a, well, he's
Trash
trash.
company in Lacrosse.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it was like 30 roll-offs.
Okay.
What was the one that was 3,100? Was that the Monroe's?
No, that was our regular city cleanup for spring cleanup.
Because one of the other things, like on the cost estimated, spreadsheet is I always put miscellaneous small equipment. That can cover everything from like a shovel to a chainsaw to a rake. I mean, just anything and everything, type stuff. That's a pretty standard, one that I include in all the contracts. Mobilization costs, that line item is pretty standard that we put in all of them and stuff. I mean, we understand that the equipment and everything is covered to get it there under the FEMA rates, but then there's also the mobilization costs, to grease it, to fill it full of fuel and all that kind of stuff. Because we don't reimburse fuel because that's included in the FEMA rate, but we just include the mobilization costs just to get everything there, type thing. So landfill fees, I think out here that's probably pretty high, as far as what my estimate of $500 was. But I don't know what the what your per ton is. More eastern Kansas is.
They were doing, there's no scale there, they were doing $60 like for a tandem truckload.
Okay,
$60 for like a tandem.
so they're not weighing at all.
They're not weighing it all, no, it's just so much a truckload.
Okay.
Well, Dave has trailers if we need to use those.
Well, I was thinking, what if we got an estimate from Skillet? And he's got the truck and he's got the skid steer and he can haul it. I think we should do that. We had a house tore down and it was $3,500 and he demolished it all in 2 days.
Okay,
And he demolished it all, but he didn't have to haul it off, but
correct.
he's got a big truck that can haul a lot of waste.
Mhm.
Good idea.
He's got a skid steer and he don't mess around. When he gets on a project, he finishes it. It's not,
I would recommend if you're gonna use a contractor to get city staff, there, because then that helps keep the cost reimbursed, or helps get you your 25% match,
Like load the truck.
and stuff, because,
Yeah.
because if he's a contractor and he's gonna charge, say whatever dollar amount he's gonna charge.
yeah, he would come and give us an estimate.
Yeah,
I think he's reasonable.
As long as it's gonna be somewhere around because he's got what, here, $1,900?
Yeah, about 10,000 here.
Oh, no, I'm taking, but this is just ours. 1,900 is all
Yeah.
but this cost estimate is 7,000 for the whole project.
Well, if he-
He's only charging us 1,900, so
If you do a 10,000 project,
2,500.
yeah, 2,500. This is just an estimate. This is more,
For the whole project.
right.
yeah, it's for the whole project.
Because if you look at the one I sent out, just for example, just guesstimating, the total number of employees, the equipment, that is far above what your 25% is and stuff. So what that represents is if you have, employees and, and using, the city equipment, you're just losing the time. You're getting full reimbursement for everything down below because you've met your 25% by using in-kind services.
I mean, I think it would be best to try to get it all ourselves, and then if it was to become too overwhelming, then we could maybe call in a contractor, but I don't think it will be. I think that we should be able to do it with our equipment.
Well, he's got to haul the debris off. We have no place to go with the debris. We have no big truck here.
No, but if the roll-off company, like a Staub would come and pick it up, he would take it, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, he would charge you for a dump disposal fee.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They
He would
It's all-
charge you,
It's all included in that $275 per roll-off,
Yeah.
because that's what we paid last time. That was to haul it to Great Bend, to dump it off, and then for the metal price, like when they did the metal part, to Acme, whatever he sold of the metal went back to pay for our roll-off for our city cleanup. So it kind of brought itself back full circle.
yeah. That's a real reasonable price.
It was really reasonable.
If-
Yeah.
That's real reasonable to haul it off.
Yeah, that's what one of the nice things about the roll-off is that you don't have to worry,
The mileage.
about the mileage or anything. Normally, there's a drop fee, and then there's, the haul fee to the landfill, and whatever the disposal costs, are direct, to come back. But it's usually one of the most cost-efficient ways. Now, if the city had a couple of big-sized dump trucks, and all the equipment to be able to load it and everything, then for something this size, I'd be like, sure, that wouldn't be an issue. But, because I doubt that you have a great big dump truck.
No. Little bitty.
Yeah, and that'd be like, we'd just be standing there the entire time waiting for the truck to get back.
Yeah.
But if the city, would like to, look at the contractor estimate, that's up to the city and stuff. And that's something that we can move forward with all the paperwork as is right now. And the city can do that because our fiscal year ends June 30th. So my goal is to have this one done by June 30th. If we don't, then I can do a 90-day extension that gets us, 90 days from July 1st. But I'd prefer just to have this all done and wrapped up, by June
Like,
30th.
do I need to have the resolution written before or after everything gets signed?
I need the resolution before I can do anything else.
So I need to do it like today?
I need to have the resolution, needs to be
Okay.
passed and everything like that, so.
Okay, so I need to write it, okay, I gotcha.
Yeah, because I need the resolution, and then I need the, signed sexual harassment form, which anyone from the city can sign. It doesn't
So I
matter.
can just- I can
You
sign
can
that?
sign that
Okay.
one, but I need those, and, basically the city, approval for everything else, as presented. And then I can move forward with getting all my paperwork done, because it takes 2 to 3 weeks for it to go through my process on KDHA,
Does that-
and stuff.
Does that resolution have to be more in-depth, or can it be the standard one that you've already sent it?
It can be, that's the one that almost every city, uses.
It's a little bit more
Yeah.
than we would need, but I can,
But,
what we-
the exact wording doesn't matter to me.
yeah.
It's more of how you would like for it, to read, just as long as it mentions, the property and that, that it has been deemed, that kind of stuff and everything, so, but yeah.
Yeah, that'd be pretty simple.
Yeah. And everyone always asks me if I have it in a Word version. I don't, because every city I ask them to send me the Word version after they type it up, and I never get the Word version back. I just get the signed PDF. Because they're like, well, we didn't get it, so we're not. I mean, it'd be nice if I had it in Microsoft Word,
I could do that.
because then you
I
could
would
very
actually do
easily just
that.
go in and make the changes. But
To just make a template?
yeah, just make
Yeah.
the template. But I always get the signed PDF. And I've never been ambitious enough to do it myself, to be honest.
Now that we have Mr. Liberton here in person, I have a question as far as granting access. We granted access to the property. Can you explain how the property access works?
Okay, under the consent access agreement, which I've also sent for the city to sign, and that's the same thing, anyone within the city can sign that agreement.
Okay.
Whoever has authority, it could be city clerk, it could be the mayor, whoever, type thing. Under the consent access agreement, let me take one step back. For me to do these projects, there's only 2 ways I can come onto private person's property. Number 1 is either through the consent access agreement, which is a voluntary, that allows KDHE and our representatives, in this case, it's the city of McCracken. Under the consent access agreement, it just, like the city can only be on the property when I'm there. And then once we determine that we are done with the cleanup, then the consent access, as far as the city goes to come back on the property, is taken away. But for KDHE, I'm going to keep an eye on the property every so often when I drive through. The second way I can get access to a property is through the legal action, what's called administrative order. That assesses fines and penalties for all the different solid waste violations, that occur. As far as going forward, once the property is cleaned up, KDHE, by the way the state statute reads, I can never come back and spend money on a site again. I can never do the legal dump program on a site again and stuff. There are other legal actions, that we would take against the property, but ultimately the responsibility, for the property staying in compliance rests with the property owner, and then the city enforcing, their codes, to make sure it doesn't happen again. If I'm coming through the area, I'm going to pull off and, just take a look and just to see, what's happening, just to make sure. Majority of the sites stay clean because of the potential fines and penalties that, that KDHE could come back, on them for and stuff. So basically what I'm asking is, don't let the property, go back out of compliance. But we don't assume, liability to make sure that the property stays that way, because I can't do code enforcement across the state, on those. I know, but I crisscross so much that if I'm in the area, I'll stop by, and I'm doing some sites in southwest Kansas, so, this isn't out of the way for me to come by, so.
All right. Anything else?
I'm a little worried about taking on the responsibility, and we need it cleaned up. There's gonna be 200 more projects like this that are gonna come about, that the people are gonna think that the city's responsible for cleaning up. Sure, we need to clean it up, yes, but I'm worried about that.
That makes sense.
If the city
There's gonna be
has,
200 more people show up for a handout.
if the city has other properties, that you would like to be cleaned up, we could work those, over the next several years as well.
But they make the determination, not the people, right?
Correct.
That's the thing.
If you have other properties that, you would like for me to take a look at while I'm here and stuff, I can sure take a look at some other properties and give you what my opinion is, and maybe just, you know, kind of off the top of my head, a cost estimate and whether we want to do that, because not every property that I get involved in involves like a full-scale cleanup. The number one thing, you know, I try to do, if there is the ability, is to do voluntary compliance. So just because one site we did this, you know, like, you know, this property, it doesn't mean that the next property is going to be handled the same way, because each property owner is different. Because I do a lot of my sites just on voluntary compliance by just, you know, coming in and saying, you know, you're out of compliance, you need to get this cleaned up on your own first, you know, but in some cases that is not an option, you know, to be able to do that. So we do move forward with expending funds. But if I can get away with cleaning up sites without spending money, that gives me more sites I can do across the state of Kansas. The less money I spend, I can do more sites. Or there's times where we do it under an administrative order and we do assess restitution, you know, back to the people as well. You know, so there is several different avenues. And if the people in the community are complaining, normally what most communities do is say, well, we've referred them to KDHE, they'll get to them as soon as they can. You know, so it takes it off of you and it, you know, it's put on to me and stuff, you know, because I can't come in and do 5 or 6 sites, you know, next, you know, our next fiscal year, you know, but I could probably do maybe 1 or 2 depending on the size of them. So I can't do all of them at one time because I have to spread my money out throughout the entire state.
So, the next things you need from us are a resolution, and resolution is first. So we need to drop a resolution, this board, this commission needs to vote on it, and then we go from there.
Right, I mean, just as soon as I get the resolution, the signed consent agreement that I sent in that email, and then that signed sexual harassment policy, as soon as I get those, and I can submit, you know, because I have all the other paperwork on my back end done. Because normally, you know, when I send out all the contract paperwork, I do everything else, because there's other forms I have to fill out, other things I have to complete. I do all that at the same time, so when I get it back, I can just put it together in one packet, get my supervisors to sign off on the memo that I have to put, and then it's ready to go to concurrence. You know, the quicker we can get it into concurrence, you know, or our contract approval process, you know, the more time we're going to have before June 30th to get it done. Because it takes at least 2 to 3 weeks on my end, you know, to get all the signatures.
Right.
Because they'll send the contract out by email as far as, and then you just do it like on a DocuSign, is what you do.
Are you gonna run by and go through and mark kind of what stays, what goes?
I'm not
while
going to
you're
mark
here today,
anything
or-
that goes or stays until we actually have, you know, the contract established and stuff.
Oh, you don't want us to take that red tape or anything?
Not
Okay,
right now,
Gotcha.
no. No, because the simple, I do want to go and look at the property with you folks, because I would like to see what's been done, update my pictures, get the receipts, you know, those type of things. I just don't want to do that until we actually have the contract established.
Gotcha.
And stuff, so, because I have had situations where it's very, very rare, but, you know, at this stage, I've had, you know, different, you know, cities, you know, pull out and decide we're not gonna go forward with this, you know, type thing and stuff, you know, just because of X, Y, Z and stuff. I mean, you're under no legal obligation at this point. I mean, even though you did fill out the request, even though we have put in all this time and effort, there's no legal obligation for the city to enter into a contract. We can't force you, nor are we going to, and stuff. I would prefer that you did, because I'd like to see, you know, the time that I have spent, you know, get the property cleaned up. But ultimately, if you tell us no, you know, we just don't feel comfortable at this point because of change in whatever, that's the city's decision.
Gotcha. Well, Toby, I think we've exhausted your knowledge on this.
Well,
You've done a
hopefully I
good
didn't
job
talk
of-
too much.
You've done a great job of explaining it.
I've been doing this for a while, almost 6 years, and I've done, I mean, I do city council and county commission meetings all across the state, and I can tell you, it really is a beneficial program. I normally get asked if we could expand it to tear down houses or tear down buildings, to do those cleanups, and I wish we could, but the cost, across the state would be astronomical, to try to include that. And the law that operated this program, it just doesn't allow for that and stuff. So anything I can do, any questions, give me a call, let me know. When I'm on the road like today, my office phone transfers to my state cell phone, so if you need to call me, I do try to check my email periodically as I'm traveling and stuff when I can. But I'll be in Garden City the rest of today and then most of tomorrow, so if you have something that you need, I can probably stop by on my way back, so.
I bet I can have this resolution drawn up in an hour, like as soon as we get done here, it would take me about an hour.
As long as the council passes
Then we
it.
would have to have a special meeting to pass it, and then,
That's why my question was, why couldn't it just use the original one he sent you and just put the address in and call it good?
because it's not like, it's too extensive for what we would have. We don't have all all that's not
Yeah,
necessary.
because the
It's
one
not
I sent has a
necessary.
different city in
Okay.
it.
Yeah,
and
I
stuff,
mean, it would take me an hour
Oh,
if
Yeah.
I went home and did it right now, and, yeah, it would take me an hour, then we could have a special
Can you
meeting.
keep your
and
city
approve it.
council meeting open until you? so
We
you
can
do not
adjourn
do-
till, yeah, we
You
can
could
adjourn until,
adjourn until
yes.
you have that done, and then you
Uh-huh.
could get it passed and signed?
Yes, we can do that.
I would recommend that, so that way you didn't have to go through all the
All right, I wouldn't even have to
all the
leave, I can do it right in here.
notifications.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay. And then just scan it and email, everything, the resolution, the signed copy of it, the resolution, that sexual harassment,
Mm-hmm.
and then the signed consent, agreement and stuff, so.
Consent agreement, that's in. I got it in my email.
I have a question.
Mother's not well.
Is George's property one of the ones that you guys are thinking of doing a cleanup on? George's old property?
that's already been a KDHE property one.
That's what I'm saying.
It wouldn't work again.
It wasn't through this program, was it?
It wasn't it through this
I
program?
don't know, that's my question.
If they came in and cleaned it up and
They
did
didn't-
everything.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and
Didn't
look.
have
No,
though.
George, go on.
Yeah.
Wineland's property?
To just approve it.
I think
He
you,
don't own that though, somebody else owns it.
Yeah,
yeah, somebody bought it, but
his wife's.
I'm just saying it, yeah.
Doctor.
That was kind of weird, because I don't think it was through the same program because of how it was done, was totally different than this, yeah.
Okay, well, I think we've
Well, we could let Chris
accomplished what we
go.
needed to accomplish.
Yeah, I've got to run.
Yeah, he needs to run. Toby, when are you gonna be back through this area?
I'm headed, as soon as we're gonna go look at the property, then I'll be in Garden City tomorrow and stuff. I've got a meeting with the county in the morning and then the city in the afternoon, then one of their HOAs in the afternoon as well. So it'd be sometime tomorrow evening and stuff. And then on my way back, I've got to look at a site in Lincoln County before it gets dark and stuff. So, but I could stop by, if I needed to.
Or I can just email those to you too,
Yeah, you can
once it's
just-
signed. We don't need you
Yeah,
to
we
like
don't-
physically
no.
pick them up, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the emails would be my preference, so that way I can take the most direct route
Yeah.
and stuff, so.
So if we
Okay.
kept our meeting open, then Nicole, you did your resolution, we let Chris go, and if he wanted to attend by phone to hear the resolution, he could, and then Brian and I could then go on to vote,
Yeah,
then
that
with
could
the
work. You could
majority,
vote over the
and then you
phone.
could still get it all done today, and you wouldn't have to
Yeah, that's fine.
put another meeting and then do another notice for 2 hours and all
It's up
that.
to you.
I'll vote over the phone, that'd be fine. Okay,
Okay.
all right. All right, see ya.
Good luck.
All right, well, the purposes of
Thank you
this
very much.
meeting, I think we're done, so I'll
Motion
ask
to
for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Are we adjourning or are we just,
adjourning until I get done.
till further
I
notice?
guess we're putting,
On hold.
Can we not take a, what do you call it, like a
yeah.
recess? Can we recess the meeting?
Let's recess.
Yes.
I'll make a motion to recess the meeting until
What time
the
is it?
resolution is ready to be then voted on. Does that work?
That works. I will second that.
Okay.
So we got a first and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We will recess until the resolution is drawn up and we can vote.